The Great Hall of Nexus Prime had never seen such chaos. 847 different species filled the massive chamber, their voices creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, and electronic sounds that hurt the ears. The crystal walls glowed with nervous energy from the bioluminescent beings, while others released stress pheromones that made the air thick and heavy. Ambassador Ali stood at the center podium, his four arms spread wide for attention. His skin shifted from deep purple to angry red as he spoke. The translation devices worked overtime to convert his words into hundreds of languages. "The matter before us today cannot wait any longer," Ali announced. His voice carried the authority of the Dominion, one of the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. For 300 years, we have maintained peace through the sacred practice of, when conflicts arise, we bargain, we trade, we find solutions that benefit all parties. A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. There was more than just negotiation. It was the foundation of galactic civilization. Every species understood this basic truth. Everything could be bargained for, everything had a price. But today, Ali continued, we face something new, something that threatens the very order we have built. His eyes fixed on a small section near the back of the chamber. The humans refused to bargain. All attention turned to the human delegation. It was pitifully small compared to the others, just 5 individuals sitting in chairs that looked too simple for such an important place. Other species brought hundreds of advisors, cultural specialists, and negotiation experts. The humans brought 5 people and a small metal briefcase. Captain Sarah sat perfectly still in the center of the human group. She was a small woman with graying hair and calm brown eyes. Her uniform was plain blue with simple rank markings. Nothing about her suggested she represented a species that had somehow upset the entire galactic order. "Captain," Ali called out, "please approach the negotiation circle." Stood slowly and walked down the long ramp to the center of the chamber. Her footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. Behind her, the other 4 humans remained seated, showing no sign of nervousness or fear. The negotiation circle was an ancient space marked by carved symbols from every member species. Stepped inside and turned to face the assembled delegates. She looked remarkably small, surrounded by beings that towered over her, had multiple heads, or glowed with their own light. "The terms are simple," Ali began. "Humanity will surrender all claims to the 442 system. The 3 million human colonists will be relocated to a suitable world in the Outer Rim territories. In exchange, your species will receive safe passage guarantees and full council protection for your new settlement." Listened without expression. Several delegates leaned forward, curious about how the humans would counteroffer. Some species were known for dramatic negotiation tactics, others for complex mathematical proposals. A few always demanded cultural exchanges or genetic samples. "This is generous," added Counselor Rim, whose insect-like species controlled vast manufacturing networks. "The system contains rare minerals worth more than most civilizations produce in a century. We offer you safety and peace instead of riches." "Your people are new to space," chimed in another voice. "Perhaps you do not understand the value of what we offer. Council protection is worth more than any single world." More voices joined in, each adding their own perspective on why the human position was unreasonable. They spoke of practical matters, of resource allocation, of the greater good. They used words like logical and beneficial and mutually advantageous. Waited until they finished. The chamber fell silent again, 847 species waiting for her response. Negotiation experts prepared to analyze whatever complex proposal she would present. Cultural advisors stood ready to interpret human customs and social dynamics. Opened her mouth and spoke one word, "No." The word hung in the air like a physical thing. For several seconds, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The translation devices had no trouble with the word. It was simple and clear in every language. "No," Ali repeated, his skin shifting to a confused orange color. You refuse to negotiate." "That's correct," said calmly. "But," Counselor Rim's mandibles clicked rapidly, "you must have terms, counterproposals, requirements, something you want in exchange." "We want to keep our system," replied. "We want our people to stay where they are. We want to be left alone." "That is not how this works." Ali's color deepened to angry red. "You cannot simply refuse. They exists for a reason. Conflicts must be resolved through bargaining." Shrugged, "We're not bargaining." The chamber erupted. Delegates jumped to their feet, tentacles waving, voices raised in shock and outrage. Some species had never heard of anyone refusing to negotiate. Others thought it must be a translation error. A few wondered if humans were somehow mentally deficient. "This is impossible," shouted someone from the middle sections. "Every rational being understands the principle of exchange." "Perhaps they need more time to consider," suggested another voice. "New species often struggle with complex negotiations." "Or they need better advisors," added a third. "Clearly their delegation lacks experience." Stood quietly in the center of the chaos, unmoved by the storm of voices around her. She looked almost bored, as if she had expected this reaction. Ali raised all four arms for silence. Slowly, the noise died down. "Captain," he said, his voice tight with control, "surely you understand that your position is unreasonable. The Dominion has legitimate claims to the system. Historical precedent supports our position. The Council recognizes our rights." "And we don't care," said simply. Another wave of shocked murmurs swept the chamber. Several delegates clutched translation devices, certain they had malfunctioned. "You don't care," Ali's voice rose in pitch. "About law, about precedent, about the established order." "No," said "we don't." She turned and walked back up the ramp to her seat. Her four companions showed no surprise or concern at her words. They simply sat there, watching the chaos their captain had created with what looked like mild interest. The great chamber of Nexus Prime had seen many strange things over the centuries. It had hosted negotiations between species that breathed different atmospheres, that experienced time differently, that had completely alien concepts of value and worth. But it had never seen anything like this. Nobody had ever simply said no. As the session dissolved into confused arguments and emergency consultations, one fact became clear to everyone present. The humans had just done something impossible. They had broken the foundation of galactic civilization with a single word. Doctor had studied over 200 species in his long career. As the galaxy's leading expert on primitive species integration, he had helped dozens of civilizations make the transition from planetary to galactic citizenship. He thought he understood how intelligent life worked. The humans made no sense at all. Stared at the data streams flowing across his workstation in the research level of Nexus Prime. Around him, his team worked frantically to understand what had gone wrong in the main chamber 3 days ago. The emergency session was still ongoing, but now they had a bigger problem than one stubborn negotiation. "Show me the psychological profile again," said to his assistant, a young named. The holographic display shimmered to life, showing a complex web of data points and behavioral patterns. Most species had clear, predictable structures. Hive minds showed unified decision-making patterns. Social hierarchies displayed clear dominance and submission behaviors. Even the most aggressive species had logical self-preservation instincts. The human profile looked like someone had fed random data into the computer. "They have no hive structure," a reported, reading from his notes. "No pheromone-based communication system. No instinctual hierarchy markers. They appear to make decisions as individuals, but somehow coordinate group actions without any detectable biological programming. "That's impossible," muttered Dr. Hen, another member of the team. Her crystalline structure chimed softly as she spoke. "Complex space-faring civilizations require unified decision-making processes. How do they achieve anything?" Pulled up another data screen. "It gets worse. Look at their historical patterns." The display showed a timeline of human conflicts throughout their recorded history. What he saw there made his specialized organs ache with confusion. Humans had repeatedly chosen to fight rather than negotiate. They had destroyed their own cities rather than surrender them. They had died for abstract concepts that had no physical form. "They have something they call principles," a read from the cultural analysis. "These appear to be non-material concepts that they value more highly than survival, resources, or territorial control." "Principles?" Dr. Hen's chiming took on a discordant note. "What are principles?" Nobody could answer that question. The concept didn't translate properly into any known language. It was something like rules that cannot be broken, but also ideas worth dying for, and beliefs stronger than logic. The translation programs kept producing error messages when they tried to find equivalent concepts in other languages. Opened another file. Their military history is even more disturbing. In something called World War II, humans surrounded in a city called Stalingrad chose to eat leather rather than surrender. They fought with kitchen knives when they ran out of weapons. They continued fighting even when their situation was hopeless. "But why?" I asked. "What did they gain?" "Nothing," said quietly. "They gained nothing. Many of them died, the city was destroyed, but they refused to give up." The team worked in silence for several minutes, each trying to process information that went against everything they understood about intelligent behavior. Rational beings preserved themselves. They made logical choices based on cost and benefit. They understood that survival was the highest priority. "There's more," Dr. Hen said, her voice taking on a worried tone. "Intelligence reports from the system." The main display switched to show recent surveillance data from the disputed system. What they saw there made the situation even more confusing. More human ships had arrived at. Instead of evacuating their 3 million colonists as any sane species would do when faced with council pressure, the humans were bringing in more people. Construction vessels were building what looked like defensive platforms around the planets. "They're fortifying," observed. "But that makes no tactical sense. They're outnumbered 1,000 to 1. Look at this," pointed to an audio file. "They're broadcasting music on all frequencies." The team listened to the strange sounds coming from the human fleet. It was rhythmic and melodic, but unlike any war chants or intimidation displays from other species. The humans sounded happy. "They're singing," Dr. Hen said in disbelief. "They're about to face annihilation and they're singing." Pulled up more files, trying to find some pattern that would make sense of human behavior. What he found only made things worse. Humans formed emotional attachments to inanimate objects. They named their spaceships and talked to them like living beings. They felt personally connected to planets they had never visited just because other humans lived there. "This is their exploration pattern," he said, displaying a galactic map. "Look at where they've been in the past 50 years. Red dots marked human presence throughout the galaxy. At first glance, it looked random humans had visited hundreds of systems with no apparent pattern. But as highlighted the trade routes and resource flows, something else became visible. They've been everywhere, a breath. Every major trade junction, every strategic passage, every critical system. They have ships there." "That's not exploration," Dr. Hen realized. "That's reconnaissance." The implications hit them all at once. While the Council had been treating humans as a primitive species needing guidance, the humans had been quietly mapping galactic civilization. They had sent their ships to every important location, always with innocent explanations. scientific research, cultural exchange, trade missions. "How many ships?" asked his voice tight. Worked at his console for several minutes. "At least 3,000 vessels, maybe more. They're scattered across 600 systems." The number was staggering. Most species kept their entire fleet within a few dozen light-years of their home systems. The humans had spread across the galaxy like some kind of infection. "What are they doing out there?" Dr. Hen asked. Before anyone could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the research facility. Emergency broadcasts echoed through the corridors in dozens of languages. "All staff to emergency stations. Priority alert from the Military Council. Fleet deployment to system has encountered unexpected resistance." And his team looked at each other in growing horror. The 7th Fleet was the Council's most elite military force, 200 ships crewed by professional soldiers from a dozen species. They had been sent to end the human problem quickly and efficiently. "Unexpected resistance," a whispered. "From what? The humans have maybe 50 ships total in that system." More announcements followed. Emergency medical ships were being deployed. Additional fleets were being mobilized. Council leadership was calling for immediate session. Dr. Hen's crystalline form began to glow with stress patterns. "What if we've been wrong about them? What if humans aren't primitive at all?" Stared at the galactic map, at the red dots marking human presence across known space. For the first time in his career, he wondered if his species had made a terrible mistake. They had assumed that because humans were new to galactic society, they were weak. They had assumed that because humans smiled and seemed friendly, they could be easily controlled. "Get me everything," said urgently. "Every piece of data on human activity in the past year. Every ship movement, every communication intercept, every cultural exchange." As his team scrambled to comply, had a growing suspicion that they were about to discover something that would change everything. The humans hadn't just refused to bargain. They had been planning for this moment all along. Admiral Ra had commanded fleets for over 60 years. She had brought peace to 12 rebellious systems and convinced 43 primitive species to accept council authority. The 7th Fleet was her pride, 200 of the finest warships in the galaxy, crewed by the most professional soldiers from a dozen civilizations. She had never expected to face an enemy that sang while fighting. "Admiral, we're receiving another transmission from the human fleet," reported Commander Oss from the communications station. His tentacles moved nervously across the controls. "It's the same audio pattern they've been broadcasting for the past 2 hours. Ra's 4 eyes focused on the main display. The human fleet hung in space before them, barely 50 ships, mostly converted cargo vessels and small patrol craft. By any reasonable military assessment, they should have surrendered the moment the 7th Fleet arrived in the system. Instead, they had broadcast an audio message in what humans called English, followed by the same musical pattern over and over. The translation computers identified it as something called Born to Run, apparently some kind of ancient human cultural artifact. "What's the tactical status?" Ra asked her weapons officer. "Unchanged, Admiral. The human vessels maintain position around the 3rd planet. They've launched approximately 200 objects toward our formation, but our sensors indicate they're just cargo containers. No weapons signatures detected." Ra felt the familiar calm that came before battle. The humans were clearly desperate, throwing whatever they had at the fleet in hopes of creating some kind of distraction. Cargo containers couldn't possibly damage military-grade shields and armor. "Time to impact." 30 seconds, Admiral. "All ships maintain formation. Let them see how ineffective their desperation is. Perhaps it will encourage them to surrender." The first container reached the outer perimeter of the fleet. Ra watched on the main screen as it approached the heavy cruiser Inevitable Victory. The ship's defensive systems didn't even activate. There was no point in wasting energy on harmless debris. The container touched the cruiser's shields and exploded. The explosion was like nothing Ra had ever seen. A ball of nuclear fire expanded outward, overwhelming sensors and filling space with deadly radiation. The inevitable victory vanished in the blast, along with its crew of 800 beings. What was that? She shouted over the alarms now sounding throughout her flagship. Nuclear detonation, the tactical officer reported. Fusion warhead approximately 50 megatons. Impossible. Cargo containers can't carry nuclear weapons. But even as she spoke, more containers reached the fleet. Each one exploded with the same devastating force. Ships that had survived centuries of conflict simply disappeared in balls of nuclear fire. They weaponized their supply ships, Commander Oss said in amazement. Every cargo container is a bomb. Ra watched in horror as her perfect formation dissolved into chaos. Ships scattered in all directions, trying to avoid the approaching containers. Some vessels collided with each other in their panic. Others were caught by explosions that gutted their hulls and left them drifting in space. "Return fire," she ordered. "All weapons maximum yield." The 7th Fleet's response was swift and devastating. Energy beams and projectile weapons lashed out at the human ships. Several were destroyed immediately, their hulls no match for military-grade firepower. But the humans didn't retreat. They didn't even try to avoid the incoming fire. They just kept launching containers and singing their strange song. "Admiral," the communications officer called out. "Priority message from Nexus Prime." Ra's personal screen lit up with the face of General, the Council's supreme military commander. Behind him, she could see the Emergency Command Center in full crisis mode. "Admiral, what's your status?" demanded. "We've lost 18 ships," Ra reported. "The humans are using some kind of suicide tactic with nuclear weapons hidden in cargo containers." 18 ships, his expression changed, against 50 converted cargo vessels. "Sir, they're not fighting like any rational species. They're not even trying to win. They're just trying to cause maximum damage before they die." Was quiet for a moment. "Admiral, we've just received disturbing intelligence from across the galaxy. I need you to maintain position and continue engagement, but be aware that the situation has changed dramatically." "Changed how?" "The humans weren't just in the system, they're everywhere." The transmission ended, leaving Ra staring at a blank screen. Around her, the battle continued. Her fleet was slowly winning. The humans were losing ships faster than the Council forces, but at a cost nobody had expected. Every human ship destroyed took at least one Council vessel with it. Minutes later, her personal communicator chimed with an incoming message. The source code identified it as coming from Captain Sarah, the human representative who had caused this entire crisis. "This is Admiral of the Human Colonial Defense Force," the message began. Ra noted that the human's title had apparently changed from Captain to Admiral sometime in the past few days. "Admiral Ra, I'm transmitting this message from the bridge of the Terra's Pride. As you can see, my people are willing to die for what they believe in. But I want you to understand something important. This battle isn't really about the system." On the screen, stood calmly despite the fact that her ship was clearly under fire. Explosions flashed outside the viewports behind her, but she seemed completely untroubled. "While you've been focused on our little dispute here, I'm afraid your council has discovered a rather significant problem. You see, over the past 3 years, human ships have visited most of the major systems in Council space. We told everyone we were conducting scientific research, cultural exchanges, trade negotiations, all perfectly innocent activities." Smiled, and for the first time, Ra noticed something cold in the human's eyes. "What we didn't mention was that we were also conducting a detailed analysis of galactic infrastructure, power generation systems, communication networks, transportation hubs, food distribution centers, everything that keeps your civilization running. And we made some improvements. The Admiral's blood felt like ice in her veins. Our engineers are very good at their jobs, continued. They can build systems that are more efficient than what you had before. Better power output, faster data transmission, improved safety features. Everyone was very grateful for our contributions to galactic society. What they didn't realize was that these improvements came with some additional features. Hidden subroutines, embedded control systems, remote access protocols, the kind of things that let us monitor and control infrastructure from anywhere in the galaxy. Ra's hands moved quickly over her controls, trying to contact Fleet Command. She needed to warn them immediately. I wouldn't bother trying to call for help, said, as if reading her mind. Your communication systems are currently experiencing some technical difficulties. In fact, I think you'll find that most of your technology is having problems right about now. Alarms began sounding throughout Ra's flagship. Power fluctuations cascaded through the ship systems. The main engines went offline. Weapons systems shut down one by one. The truth is, Admiral, this battle was never about military strength. It was about making a point. You wanted to bargain for one human system. We now control the infrastructure of 37 Council worlds. His image flickered as the ship's power systems continued to fail. I'm transmitting new terms to what's left of your fleet. You have 1 hour to consider them. After that, we'll demonstrate what happens when humans stop being cooperative. The transmission ended, leaving Ra in darkness as her ship's lights went out. Around her, she could hear the sounds of systems shutting down throughout the vessel. In the space around, the human colonial defense force stopped singing. The sudden silence was somehow more terrifying than their music had been. The galaxy was about to learn that humans didn't just refuse to bargain. They had been preparing to make their own rules all along. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been running for 6 hours without a break. In all the centuries of galactic civilization, nothing like this had ever happened before. Delegates who had arrived expecting to discuss the simple matter of human relocation now faced the collapse of everything they understood about power and control. Ambassador Ali stood at the central podium, his skin cycling through colors of confusion, anger, and fear. Around him, 847 species tried to comprehend reports that seemed impossible. The Vega manufacturing complex is completely offline, reported Counselor Rim. His insect-like mandibles clicked rapidly as he spoke. All automated systems have shut down. 20 billion workers cannot access their stations. The banking network has frozen all transactions, added another delegate. No transfers, no currency exchanges, no credit authorizations. The entire economic system is paralyzed. Communications between the outer rim colonies have been severed, called out a third voice. 47 systems are completely isolated. The reports kept coming, each one worse than the last. Food distribution networks had stopped functioning. Transportation hubs couldn't coordinate ship movements. Even the life support systems on some space stations were experiencing mysterious failures. How is this possible? Ali demanded. These systems are protected by the most advanced security protocols in the galaxy. They cannot be compromised by primitive technology. Doctor rose from his seat in the research section. His usual confidence had vanished, replaced by the hollow look of someone whose entire worldview had crumbled. The technology isn't primitive, he said quietly. We were wrong about everything. Explain, Ali ordered. Activated his personal display, showing a galaxy-wide map covered in red markers. For the past 3 years, human teams have been working on infrastructure projects across Council space. They offered improvements to existing systems, better efficiency, enhanced capabilities, cost reductions. Everyone welcomed their contributions. The map zoomed in on various systems, showing the extent of human involvement. Power plants on 17 worlds, communication arrays on 32 systems, manufacturing complexes on 53 planets. They weren't helping us, continued. They were installing control mechanisms. Every improvement they made included hidden access points that they could activate remotely. But our security systems, Counselor Rim began, were designed to detect external threats, interrupted. The humans didn't attack from outside. They convinced us to invite them in. They worked alongside our best engineers, learned our systems from the inside, and then built better versions with that we couldn't detect. A new alarm sounded throughout the chamber. The lights flickered, and the main display systems went dark for several seconds before returning to life. That was Nexus Prime's primary power grid, announced the station commander. We've just lost backup generators 3 through 7. Life support is now operating at 60% capacity. The implication hit everyone at once. The humans hadn't just compromised distant systems. They had infiltrated the Council's own headquarters. This is impossible, Ali repeated, but his voice lacked conviction. No species could coordinate an operation of this magnitude while pretending to be cooperative members of galactic society. We underestimated them, Doctor said. We assumed they were like us, logical beings who would accept their place in the established order. We didn't understand that they could plan decades in advance while maintaining perfect cooperation. The chamber's main communication system activated without anyone touching the controls. The face of Sarah appeared on every screen, transmitted simultaneously to hundreds of worlds across the galaxy, but was no longer wearing the simple blue uniform of a human delegation member. She now wore dark clothing marked with unfamiliar symbols and carried herself with the confident authority of someone who held absolute power. Council members, she began, her voice calm and professional. I am Admiral Sarah, representing the sovereign government of humanity. I believe you've been experiencing some technical difficulties. The chamber erupted in angry voices, but continued speaking as if she couldn't hear them. For the past several hours, you've been discovering the extent of human presence in your infrastructure. This was not an accident. Every system we improved, every network we enhanced, every facility we helped design, all of it includes human oversight capabilities. She paused, letting the implications sink in. I want to be clear about something. We're not here to destroy galactic civilization. We're here to change the terms of our participation in it. A holographic display appeared beside, showing the same galactic map that Doctor had presented, but with additional details that made the scope of human infiltration even more obvious. 37 council systems are now dependent on human-controlled infrastructure. This includes power generation, communication networks, transportation systems, and food distribution. If we wanted to cause harm, we could reduce these worlds to pre-industrial conditions within hours. Several delegates tried to speak, but their communication systems had stopped responding to their commands. But that's not what we want, continued. We want recognition. We want equal status. We want the right to govern ourselves without interference from species that think they know what's best for us. The choice before you is simple. You can accept humanity as an equal member of galactic civilization, with full sovereignty over our chosen territories and equal voice in council decisions. Or you can continue to treat us as primitives who need guidance. The display changed to show real-time status reports from across the galaxy, power levels dropping, communication failures spreading, transportation networks grinding to a halt. If you choose the second option, you'll discover that galactic civilization is more fragile than you realized. Most of your critical systems now depend on human contributions. We can remove those contributions at any time. His expression remained calm, but her words carried the weight of absolute certainty. You taught us how your society works during our integration period. You showed us your weaknesses, your dependencies, your fears. You assumed we were students learning from superior civilizations. You forgot to ask what we were learning. The chamber had fallen completely silent. 847 species listened to one human explain how their entire civilization had been quietly captured. We learned that your peace depends on everyone accepting the same rules. We learned that your prosperity depends on complex systems that require constant maintenance. We learned that your strength comes from cooperation between species that don't really trust each other. Most importantly, we learned that you've never faced an enemy that was willing to bring down the entire system rather than submit to it. Smiled, and for the first time, the assembled delegates saw something in that expression that chilled them to their cores. It was the smile of a predator that had been patient long enough. The system was never really the issue. It was a test. We wanted to see how you would react when someone simply said no to your authority. Your response told us everything we needed to know about how you view power and control. You see cooperation as submission. You see negotiation as a way to maintain dominance. You see new species as problems to be managed rather than equals to be respected. The display shifted again, showing human colonies throughout the galaxy, not just the known settlements, but hundreds of hidden bases and outposts that had somehow escaped Council detection. We've been preparing for this conversation for much longer than you realize. While you've been debating how to handle the human problem, we've been solving the galactic authority problem. Leaned forward, and her voice took on a tone of absolute finality. Here are our terms. Humanity will be recognized as a sovereign civilization with equal council status. We will maintain control over our existing territories and have the right to expand without council approval. In exchange, your infrastructure will continue to function, and your civilization will continue to exist. You have 24 hours to accept these terms. After that, we'll demonstrate what happens when humans stop pretending to be cooperative. The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in complete darkness. When the lights finally came back on, every delegate was looking at their personal communication devices, all showing the same message. Signal transmission blocked by human security protocols. Please try again later. For the first time in galactic history, the Council couldn't even talk to itself. The humans had just taught 847 civilizations that some species don't bargain. They take what they want and dare anyone to stop them. 6 months after what history would call the crisis, the Galactic Council chamber looked very different. The Great Hall of Nexus Prime had been restructured, its ancient circular arrangement replaced with something that reflected new realities. At the center of the chamber sat the human delegation, no longer relegated to the back corners, where primitive species traditionally waited for permission to speak. Admiral Sarah occupied a position of equal prominence with the oldest and most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. The change wasn't just symbolic. In the months since humanity had revealed its true capabilities, the entire structure of galactic politics had shifted in ways that nobody had anticipated. The motion before us today concerns mining rights in the Tau system, announced the current council speaker, a crystalline being whose species had held the position for 3 centuries. The hegemony requests exclusive extraction privileges for rare earth elements found on Tau IV. Councillor Ali, representing the hegemony, stood to present his case. His skin showed confident purple patterns as he spoke. The hegemony has historical claims to this system dating back 200 years. Our mining technology is proven and efficient. We offer fair compensation to the council treasury. It was the kind of routine negotiation that had determined galactic resource allocation for centuries. Powerful civilizations made claims, smaller species received compensation, and the council maintained order through careful balance of competing interests. But the chamber's atmosphere had changed. Delegates no longer assumed that such matters would be decided by the traditional powers. They waited to hear what the humans would say. Stood slowly, her simple black uniform a stark contrast to the elaborate ceremonial robes worn by other delegates. Humanity objects to this proposal. On what grounds? Ali asked, his color shifting to annoyed orange. The inhabitants of Tau IV haven't been consulted, replied calmly. The hegemony is requesting permission to strip mine a world where 3 million beings live without asking what they want. The Tau are a pre-industrial species, Ali protested. They lack the technological sophistication to make informed decisions about resource management. They lack the technology to stop you from taking what you want, corrected. That's not the same thing. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. 6 months ago, such a comment would have been dismissed as primitive thinking from a species that didn't understand how galactic civilization worked. Now, 846 civilizations listened carefully when humans spoke about power and consent. Admiral, interrupted Counselor Rim, surely you understand the economic necessities involved. The hegemony's mining operations provide materials that benefit the entire galaxy. I understand that the hegemony wants something that belongs to someone else, replied. I also understand that they're asking the council to help them take it by force. That's not, Rim began, then stopped, because when stated that plainly, that was exactly what the request involved. Activated her personal display, showing detailed scans of the Tau system. Humanity has conducted our own survey of the system. The rare Earth deposits can be extracted from uninhabited asteroids in the outer system without disturbing the inhabited planet. It would cost more and take longer, but it's entirely feasible. Cost more? Ali's color deepened to angry red. Why should the hegemony accept reduced profits when traditional methods are available? Because the alternative is having your mining operations shut down by human intervention, said with the same calm tone she might use to discuss the weather. We've taken the liberty of placing monitoring stations throughout the system. Any unauthorized activity on Tau IV will be met with appropriate responses. The chamber fell silent. Everyone remembered what appropriate responses meant when humans were involved. The wreckage of the 7th Fleet still drifted around as a reminder. But more than that, they remembered the 24 hours that had followed humanity's ultimatum. Power grids failing across the galaxy, communication networks going dark, transportation systems grinding to a halt, entire civilizations reduced to helplessness while humans demonstrated how thoroughly they had infiltrated galactic infrastructure. The Council had accepted humanity's terms not through negotiation, but through the simple recognition that they had no choice. This is unprecedented, Ali said. The hegemony has followed all proper procedures. We have legal rights too. Legal rights granted by whom? Asked. The Tau never agreed to be part of the Council. They never consented to have their world carved up for the benefit of species they've never met. Doctor, now serving as cultural liaison to humanity, rose from his seat in the research section. His role had changed dramatically since the crisis. Instead of studying how to integrate primitive species, he now tried to help the galaxy understand the implications of the human doctrine. If I may, said carefully, Admiral raises questions about the fundamental assumptions underlying galactic governance. The concept of consent has implications that we haven't fully explored. Several younger species began murmuring among themselves. The Tau situation wasn't unique. Hundreds of pre-industrial worlds throughout the galaxy had been claimed by more advanced civilizations without anyone asking what the inhabitants wanted. You're talking about chaos, Counselor Rim protested. If every primitive species had the right to refuse development, galactic civilization would collapse. How would we maintain trade routes? resource extraction, economic stability. The same way we maintain them now, replied, through agreements between equals rather than domination of the weak by the strong. But that would require, Ali stopped, realizing the implications of what he was about to say. Treating other beings as people instead of resources, finished. Yes, it would require that. The debate continued for hours, but the outcome was never really in doubt. 6 months ago, the hegemony's request would have been approved as a matter of routine. Now, the Council voted to require consultation with inhabited worlds before approving any development projects. As the session ended, Doctor approached the human delegation. His species' relationship with humanity had evolved from academic interest to genuine respect mixed with careful wariness. "Admiral," he said, "may I ask you something?" "Of course." "The changes you've introduced to galactic governance, were they planned from the beginning? Did you always intend to reshape our civilization?" Considered the question carefully. "We plan to survive," she said finally. "Everything else has been improvisation." But the monitoring stations around Tau, the infrastructure infiltration, the strategic positioning of human assets throughout the galaxy, that level of coordination requires decades of planning. Smiled, but it was a warmer expression than the predatory grin she had shown during the crisis. "Doctor, you still don't understand what makes humans different from other species." "Then please explain." "We don't need a central authority to tell us what to do. When humans see a problem that needs solving, we solve it. When we see an opportunity to prepare for future challenges, we prepare. When we see people being mistreated, we do something about it." She gestured toward the council chamber, where delegates were still arguing about the implications of the day's decisions. "You've spent centuries building a system that works through careful control and managed inequality. You can't imagine how a species could coordinate complex operations without central planning, because that's not how your civilizations work. But humans don't need permission to act. We don't need committees to approve our decisions. When Captain found ancient artifacts on 442, she didn't wait for instructions from Earth. She established a colony to protect them. When Engineer Park discovered vulnerabilities in Council infrastructure, he didn't ask permission to fix them. He just improved the systems and made sure humans could access them if needed. Paused, watching as younger species delegates clustered together, clearly excited by the day's discussions. Every human ship captain, every engineer, every diplomat who encountered problems in Council space took individual action to address those problems. Nobody coordinated it because nobody needed to coordinate it. We all understood what needed to be done. Doctors struggled to process this information. But without central control, how do you prevent chaos? How do you ensure consistency of action? "We share the same principles," said simply. "Freedom, equality, the right of beings to determine their own fate. When all your people believe in the same core values, you don't need complicated command structures to make them work together." As they spoke, more reports arrived from across the galaxy. Human settlements had established themselves in 12 new systems, all with Council approval. Young species were sending diplomatic missions to Earth, asking about concepts like sovereignty and self-determination. Several primitive worlds had formally requested human protection from more advanced civilizations seeking to exploit their resources. "The galaxy is changing," Doctor observed. "Yes," agreed. "But not because we're imposing our will on anyone. It's changing because other species are learning that they have choices they never knew existed." She gathered her materials and prepared to leave the chamber. "We never wanted to conquer galactic civilization, Doctor. We just wanted it to be better. Turns out, once you show people what's possible, they tend to want better things for themselves." 6 months after humanity had said no to the greatest powers in the galaxy, the most frightening thing wasn't their military capabilities or their strategic planning. It was how many other species were starting to say no as well. The humans hadn't just refused to bargain. They had taught the galaxy that some things were too important to negotiate. And that lesson was spreading faster than anyone had expected.